This is every Minecraft thing that'll confuse you. This is a bed for me, and this is a bed for my son. Or it sure looks like that, because by using some sneaky armor stands like this, we can shrink down our regular items to a much more manageable size. And with just that, we'll have ourselves a child-sized bed and a child-sized chest to keep all their items. Just don't try to open it up, then the illusion will fall apart. As wild as this L shape looks, it is possible in Minecraft history. And as Baron Dumb will show you, there was one of these triple chests that naturally generated on 2b2t. And the way this was created was by two different dungeons generating nearby each other. And nowadays, the closest we can get to this is by using a mod like Colossal Chests, which is arguably just as cursed. But why stop at placing illegal blocks when we could rotate them too? Using this modded wrench, we can rotate and nudge blocks off of their regular path, which, as 8-sided square shows, can create some hilariously cursed builds, like turning a drip leaf into a droop leaf, or putting 4 flower pots into the same 1 block space. And really, it's only going to take a few clicks before everything looks out of place. From the outside, this house doesn't seem that impressive, but this will just go to show that you shouldn't always judge a book by its cover. Since when one step through this doorway, we're actually going to enter through the immersive portals from this mod, and step right from our small house facade in the overworld into a giant house inside of the nether. And now it doesn't look like the house is so small, but rather that your friend shrunk. But hey, it can be hard to find good real estate sometimes, so this seems like a good way to have plenty of storage and not have to worry about any of the cost of the land. If you're able to get your friend to download a random resource pack, then that's basically a blank check to mess with them. Since while they think it's just doing simple things like changing the textures as so for a minigame or whatnot, the truth is that we switch the lava texture to water. And all of a sudden, exploring down in the caves gets a lot more inviting and a lot more dangerous. And the nether especially looks pretty ridiculous when you see it with this pack. At the best case scenario, they'll be confused, and at the worst case scenario, they'll end up losing their stuff to that water. And at the worst case scenario, they'll end up losing their stuff to that water inside of the nether. Normally, we're only allowed to place our torches on our floors, our walls, and that's it. However, with this, the lanterns aren't the only ones that we can plant on our ceiling. And the image of an upside down torch is really funny. I would love particularly if this is how you could get the torches to burn out, seeing as the fire just creeps up the rest of the stick that way, and you'd be left with nothing more than ash falling on your head. But I think what's really cool is that the redstone torch works the intended way too. So while I get why this isn't in the base game, I'm a little disappointed to say that we don't have this feature in it. Confusing? Yes, but cool? Also yes. Picture the situation. You built up this great dining hall and then call all of your friends for a meeting. Each of you sit in minecarts because there's really no other way to sit in the game, and when you get all of them there for that emergency meeting, that's when you finally reveal why they're actually there. You mount out these few center blocks that breaks the floor beneath you, and all of you drop into what's now what you've discovered, the ancient city. And credit to user Scrouso for their creativity with this. It's really an impressive prank. I mean, not only do you have to do all of the setup of getting your friends there and building the dining hall, but you also have to mine out all of the chunks that you actually fall into the ancient city. Then you only got one chance to actually make it work. But when you do, it's hard to say that the results don't speak for themselves. When your friend logs onto this server, as far as they know, nothing's changed. At least, nothing's changed yet. But by installing a data pack like this one by Gaming Barn, we're able to morph into different mobs in Minecraft, much like we've been able to do with morph mods in the past. Except this is pure vanilla. Your friend doesn't have to have anything installed on their end. And that's why they'll never expect it when you start to hide in with their cows and sheep. And at that point, you can get as crazy with this as you want. Whether that's hiding in their pig pen and giving them a slap when they come and try to kill you, or running away from them when they try to saddle you up and ride you as a horse. I mean, really, there's over 80 mobs in Minecraft that you could do this with, so the possibility for some great pranks are there. It's just up to you to choose which one. Why place your fences like this when we can do this instead? Well, it does offer up some extra detail, but it seems a lot less useful as a fence. I mean, what are you trying to do? Stop spiders from crawling out of a farm? I didn't think so. But if we're talking about placing blocks off the grid, then we're just getting started. In our past Building Sins videos, we've recommended against using diagonal glass panes on your corners like this, and that's because there is no diagonals for glass panes. But with this mod, we're able to do diagonal glass panes, which when you see it is immediately cursed, but also immediately cool. And here, anytime that the glass panes form with an L shape, that corner will get smoothed into a diagonal wall instead, which is quickly something cool to build with. You're just gonna take some adjusting on your eyes to get used to it. It's very safe to call this cursed, and looking at the iron bars and stained glass panes variants, that doesn't make it any easier. Honey and slime blocks are no longer sticky, and with that small change, they're completely ruined for our use in redstone, which would be bad enough, but for the honey blocks it's even worse. Since because those take up a smaller size than the slime block, you can no longer place regular blocks on top of them. That'll just cause a whole gravity snafu, and honestly it's not worth the hassle. And from now on, it might just be worth keeping your honey inside of the bottles anyway. Who knows, if you drink it, maybe it'll help cure the headache that all this causes. Here's why this anvil will never fall. Or this sign will never break, even if it's not supported by anything. So with this simple little piston contraption, we're able to completely break Minecraft logic. Now, when the sticky piston retracts, it doesn't properly update the block that's on top of it, or the one that you attach to the piston's arm. And the reason for that is because the piston doesn't actually think it's supposed to work, since the obsidian's keeping the slime blocks from being able to move. And as such, the slime blocks aren't the only one that doesn't move, and we can get all of these illegal blocks that you see here, giving us one of the simplest ways to do update suppression, and one that still works in modern versions, might I add. How's this ladder casting a shadow in Minecraft? Well, it's not a shaders mod, and it's actually not even its shadow, since when we move off to the side here, you can see that the ladder is just simply painted in such a way where if you stand from the right angle, it looks as if it's actually leaning on the wall. But the truth of the reality is that there's not even a ladder, just a wall, and a floor, I guess. This is a stone. This is a stone chunk, and this down here, that's an iota. Because with the help of the stone cutter, we can turn one stone block into progressively smaller bits, until eventually we have 262,144 stone dots, just from that original stone block. And if you're wondering, yes, you do still collide with them. So good luck making your way out of that maze. Now, if you were to put in the 12 Eyes of Ender necessary to build the end portal, it'll make the portal, but you're not going to be able to go to the end. Since with realistic gravity, the portal just falls if it's unsupported. So now if you want to make it to the end safely, the way to do this is to put down a bed of blocks underneath where the portal's going to generate. But if you break some of the support blocks after you generate the portal, then that'll cause some of the end portal blocks to teleport into the end themselves, which is all just way too meta for me to wrap my head around. Redstone and water don't mix, or at least that's what we think on Java. But if you place any of these redstone components in a lake on Bedrock Edition, it'll work just as they do on the surface. Cauldrons by themselves already do not make a lot of sense. Like, why are you able to put a full bucket of water in a cauldron, and then when you fall in it, you still break your legs at the bottom of it? But this waterlogged chest, completely fine, even if it's 1 pixel of water. Or the fact that an enderman can stand in the water inside of a cauldron and not mind it at all, even though the smallest raindrop will just make it freak out and teleport away. But perhaps the strangest one is that even though we're not able to place water inside of the nether, if you place it inside of a piping hot iron cauldron, then it doesn't boil away. In fact, it's the only way to have water in the nether. And at that point, it just seems like the cauldrons can't decide whether they do or do not want to be actual water. If you get in a boat and ride it off a cliff, you won't take any fall damage. That's not the weird part. The weird part is that if you take a boat and ride it off of specifically a 49 block tall fall, then you'll die of fall damage, and the boat breaks too. Now, that'd be okay if 49 blocks is the limit, but the fact that you're able to fall from over 50 blocks tall and still survive, then I don't get what's so special about block number 49. Or when you fall from a 114 block fall, then both you and the boat survive, but then when you get out, the boat will still break. And again, that's only block 114. Nah, who knows. Alright, pop quiz. How do you spawn a wither if there's realistic gravity? Because if you build the shape like you're used to, it's all just gonna fall apart. And that doesn't make for much of a wither. It really just makes a mess. But that's fine because there is a way to still solve this. And now, the only way to spawn the wither is to place this T shape of blocks sideways. But if you're used to spawning withers underneath the bedrock portal in the end, this is nothing new. And honestly, as long as we can still use this easy strategy, that's no skin off my back. I much prefer this anyway. Be careful not to dig from a river down into a cave, since with the way that water works now, that'll eventually cause the cave to fill up with water. And worse still, that could also end up draining your river, which would give you more than a few problems, both above ground and below it. And while this could technically happen with the ocean too, unless the cave's very big, you're really not going to see much of a dent. But all of that to say, be careful, because I don't think placing a few doors to get an air bubble is going to help you this time. At first glance, this parkour jump looks impossible, and it basically is. That is, unless you jump at the exact right moment. And while we'll have built the system and know exactly when that moment is, when your friend's chasing after you, they're not going to be privy to it, meaning that they fall into this 1 block gap and fall right the way down to their death. Which, the death would be bad enough, but they're also going to have to live with the fact that they're not as good at parkour as you. And honestly, I think that's a bigger insult. It's like a lose-lose. This skin is only possible on Bedrock Edition, since in Java, if you were to have transparent pixels in the first skin layer, it'll just turn them black instead. But in Bedrock, that's not the case. And the only requirement for Bedrock is that you have just 1 visible pixel, making for this perfect camouflage skin. Now that everything has gravity, if you try to build a piston door in the usual way, everything's gonna fall apart. And you'll see as much from this basic 2x2 door example. Even if you understand the redstone, it's not gonna make the cut. And you'll find that the only workaround to get this working in your world is that you must have the pistons both open and closed simultaneously. Otherwise, you're just left with a bunch of redstone bits falling through the cracks. And that'll be especially true if you try to build a door any larger than this one. If you thought it was hard here, it's close to impossible with these other options. You know how I mentioned that it makes sense to take damage from magma blocks? Well, that's still true, but what doesn't make sense is that when you sneak down on the magma blocks, then you don't take any damage. And I've heard a reasoning that when you're holding sneak, you're supposed to be walking more carefully on the stones of the magma. That's all well and good. good, but what's even more confusing is that when you go underneath a slab like this, visually, it still looks like you're crouching down, but if you're not holding that sneak key, the game thinks you're not, and it'll just apply damage the same. Anyone who played Minecraft in the past knows that boats used to be fragile little things, and you'd be lucky to get through a swamp without smashing it into planks and sticks. Nowadays, that's thankfully patched, but with a machine like so, we can remember those old days in somewhat of a strange way. With a wave machine like this, the force of the slime blocks will cause the boat's hitbox to launch up and then slowly maneuver back to the ground. Now, if you were to drop a gravity block on top of a villager's roof, it'll slide down the steps and land on the ground instead, which I guess makes some sense. I mean, we don't have slopes in Minecraft. This is the closest we got. But I also never thought that the stairs would be this slippery. And at the very least, I'm thankful that we never fall down them in the same way. And with this new feature for stairs, anvils can finally destroy crops. Since in the past, if you dropped an anvil on a crop, then that wheatgrass would be able to break it all the same. And I doubt I'm the only one confused why 31 iron ingots could never stand up against a couple of seeds. But now with the new physics, if you drop an anvil on top of a crop, it'll destroy the crop and leave our anvil intact. Most of us know the Easter egg to turn mobs upside down, but did you know that that works for us too? See, if you play on Bedrock Edition and you're not signed in, you can change your name to Grum or Dinnerbone, and you'll flip around just the same. If you were to find yourself an Ice Spikes biome, then you're in for a show, because now any of the ice variants, whether that's packed, blue ice, or regular, they'll all break if they fall from a height of more than 3 blocks. And they also don't generate any water when they fall, which, don't get me wrong, is cool to watch, but it's immediately concerning if you want to try to build an ice highway over in the Nether. But with how dangerous the Nether appears to be these days, it might not have been your first choice for a highway anyway. And the only way that I would consider even doing this is building it up on the Nether roof. If it isn't bedrock, I don't trust it. If you look at a sheep, it doesn't seem like the smartest of mobs. But what if I told you that these things are actually masters of disguise? Or at least they will be. See, by setting up the command blocks that we have here, our sheep turn from mindless mobs into proper chameleons, being able to blend in with their surroundings like so. And while they probably don't run across colors this vibrant in the wild, it is still cool to see this effect in action. And honestly, it's a lot more unique than just yet another sheep named Jep. Minecraft stacks by default only go up to 64, but there's something secret that happens when you get a stack of items larger than 1,073,741,823. And you're able to find it out with this mod. With the mod stacker, you're able to change the config to have up to 1 billion items in one stack. And when you have to hover over the items to just see how many you have in that stack, you know that you're pretty rich. And honestly, for how fast some farms can get in the game, it would be funny to see all of that output put into one single item slot. Oh, and what's the secret thing that happens when you get your item stack over that limit? Well, thanks to the integer limit, the game just is gonna crash. I guess we only go up to 64 for a reason, huh? If you use a Silk Touch pickaxe to break a Skulk Shrieker, then when you place it back down, it won't spawn a warden, which sounds like a downside, but to us, it's the ultimate benefit. Since by following after Green and taking a bunch of these Skulk Shriekers and putting them in your friend's base, even if they're not spawning a warden, they're still gonna give off the sound like they do. And we can stack up the volume until eventually we've got up to 247 sounds playing at the same time. And the only reason we stop at 247 is because that's the literal limit for where Minecraft stops playing noises. But believe me, even at that number, that's gonna be more than enough to rupture their headphones. And because of the way that the Skulk sensor gives off a redstone signal, literally every step that they're taking trying to find this, they're just gonna keep setting off that noise, giving you plenty of bang for what should have just been a useless shrieker. With realistic water physics, we can completely transform this river, since all it takes is for us to dig an alternative route for the river to flow, and it'll go there. But that'll also cause the rest of the water level to slightly lower, which is a weird sight, but it means that if you're dedicated enough, you could use this technique to actually drain the original branch of the river, and then you'll just be left with a dry riverbed, which, who knows, could be handy to stop drowned mobs from spawning next to your base. You'll just have to pick the right location to flow the rest of the water into, since it doesn't easily disappear. Minecraft's a game made of cubes, not circles. So how does this work? Oh really, there's actually no circle here, but really we're just getting the illusion of one by changing the line thickness outside of the circumference. So while the lines are nice and thick inside of what would have been the circle, when it gets to the outer edge, they fade off into the regular line width, which not only gives us this cool circle effect, but it also gives the illusion of depth too, making it seem as if the circle was placed inside of these different pyramids. When really, there's no pyramids and there's no circle. The image is entirely flat. Pigs in saddles are somewhat of a laughing stock when it comes to transportation, but what they lack on the ground, they more than make up for in the skies. It turns out that with the right technique, we can tie a lead between an elytra and a saddled pig and essentially create a two-person rideshare. Is it practical? I've got no clue, but clearly it's a sight to see. So if you've got both the leads and pigs to spare, it's well worth your time to try this out on the server. And if you start from the right height, you might just clear some serious distance with your friend in tow, which I think is just fantastic. From this angle, my skin looks fine, but in actuality, we've flipped it around so that my textures for my skin are actually played on my back, which gives you a great way to mess with your friends. And to go one step further and keep up the facade, if you play in third-person mode with F5, then you can navigate while keeping your skin properly oriented. That is, until it's time for the big reveal and your friend thinks they're doing something behind your back, only for you to have been able to see the entire thing all along. Mojang has never cared much for the laws of physics, and there have been plenty of posts made complaining about these nonsensical bits in Minecraft. I mean, we're even guilty of that ourselves. But who among us would complain about being able to become an actual waterbender? See, by using sticky pistons and honey blocks, we can make the water fall however we want it to. And then once you remove it, it'll actually stay that way. Simply build your structure, pour some water over top, and then break all of the blocks that you used when you're done. I mean, if you wanted to, you could use lava as well to make your own kind of modern art piece. Though to me, it looks more like a fire hazard. And really, however you choose to use this trick, it's sure to impress even the most seasoned of players. In Minecraft, it's often easy to accumulate your fair share of junk. And while throwing that stuff into a fire is a fun pastime, what if you really want to get rid of something? Like, say through some chance you came across a particularly cheaty piece of netherite. Well, if you don't have a cactus on hand, then there is one option that we tend to neglect. Items are entities, just like you and me. And that means that these things have a kill switch. So if you take an anvil sky high and drop it on a thing of items, it'll delete the stuff from existence. It's almost like we're creating our own kind of item execution system. But if you really want to get rid of your friend's diamonds, then this will do the trick and then some. You've heard the saying when pigs fly, but how about striders? And sure enough, back in Snapshot 20W14A, if you used a fishing rod to pull up a strider into the air and then jumped on it, it would just float in place. And then you could even ride it and move around while it's floating. And even though that got patched out, there is still a way to make your strider float. If you jump off a cliff with a couple of warp funguses on a stick, then when you scroll through them, the strider glitches out and it slowly descends down the fall. Let's take a look at this confusing display. Since from this angle, we just have a dirt block floating in a room. But it gets even weirder when we step to this side. Not only does the wall that should have been here disappear, but now our dirt blocks turn into copper. And then with another rotation, our copper turns into gold. And honestly, I think we have this alchemy thing figured out. Then finally we could walk around to the last remaining wall and see that the gold turned into diamond. And I'll say that if this was a multiple choice test, I think the answer's pretty easy. Or it would have been, but in our case, it ends up being all of the above. Or rather, that you should go above and then go through the roof, since that's where you get the netherite block. Or that sometimes you just need to look at something from a different point of view to end up getting the best return. When Mojang makes a change, they aren't always decisive, and sometimes that means a feature gets added in and then removed in a later update. But this seems particularly indecisive, because back in the InfDev stages of Minecraft, 4 updates in a row saw leaves change to not decay, decay, not decay, and then decay once again, which is quite the identity crisis, but luckily it's been solved. Instead of building a volcano in your next Minecraft world, you should really just build a portal, since that's what user Potato Boy did on Reddit and got the exact same effect. Now, thanks to the Immersive Portals mod, if you set up a portal on the other side of the nether, then when you glance through the top of our so-called volcano, you'll be glancing straight into the fire and the flames. And with shaders like they're using here, the effect gets even better. And hey, sacrificing people in the nether's gonna be even better at getting the job done than some volcano would. So get ready for a bountiful harvest this year. When we press the button, we're able to open up this store, but not in the way that you think. The way we do this is just by retexturing different things to look like our iron doors. So for the first one, we've got trapdoors, and then for the next we use a TNT duper to blast our way through. And my personal favorite is seeing this sand door pressing the button, and instead of falling, it's really just going up into the sky. Is gravity wrong? Are we wrong? I honestly don't know. But they did do a behind the scenes video where you can see how this actually happens. That and the original video are very cool, if not obviously confusing. Instamining is one of the simple joys of Minecraft, which is why it can be frustrating when something breaks your stride. And while plenty of things can do that, nothing bugs me more than cobblestone. As it is, cobblestone takes longer to break than normal stone. And maybe it's just me, but it seems odd that a block that's clearly already broken and smashed up takes longer to break than a solid like regular stone. Unless Steve adds some concrete or paste to cobblestone after mining it, I think it just doesn't make sense. And like I said, if you're able to get your friends to download a resource pack, then one of the funniest ones that you can trick them into getting is the Fresh Animations Villagers. Now, the Fresh Animations pack is great, but it's hard to argue that the villagers don't look a little silly. And as Green's shown off, the kind of strange looks that you can start to get from the villagers when you get your friend to download this, I mean, it's good enough to make me laugh. I hope it can make them too. This was once one of the rarest blocks in Minecraft, at least one of the rarest to find, because prior to version 1.8, chiseled bricks didn't have any kind of crafting recipe. So the only way that you'd find one of these outside of a creative mode menu would have been inside of a jungle temple, which alone is rare, and they exist within jungle biomes, which also happen to be rare. So you're gonna have to go through quite the journey just to build with one of these in your world, and thankfully now they have a crafting recipe. Do you remember the Minecraft update where Mojang deleted Minecraft? Yeah, it sounds silly, but back in the beta version for 1.1, if you launched Minecraft, everything would seem to be normal, except for when the game actually launched and you would see that there was no text text anywhere. Yep, all of the Minecraft font completely gone. Even in-game, all of the item names have completely disappeared, and you also couldn't see the item quantity, which is made particularly bad by the fact that the early textures were pretty tough to make out. So if you didn't have text to guide your hand, who's to say what any of these actually were? Minecraft has blocks and it has mobs, and oftentimes you don't see the two sides mix, but that changes today, since with the help of cleverly coded falling sand entities and armor stands, this Reddit user was capable of animating a proper functional jumping piston mob. And folks, this isn't done with any mods or resource packs, but in fact, it's fully possible using just command blocks or data pack in vanilla, and the results are equal parts ridiculous and impressive to see. And honestly, this just feels like a Pixar reference waiting to happen. It's weird to think about that when elytras were first added into the game, there wasn't a way to make them fly. Rather, they were way more of a gliding technique. That is, until players found out the unintentional way of putting their bow to use. As you can see, when you're flying around with an elytra, all it takes is hitting yourself with a couple of punch 2 arrows, and boom, you're flying off into the indefinite. Now, even if we wouldn't exactly call this a bug, it definitely wasn't what Mojang had in mind. So, as a response, in 1.11 Snapshot 16W50A, that's when we got the intended way of doing this, which was of course firework rockets. And thank goodness for that, because the last thing I'm trying to do while I'm exploring my world is land a couple of bullseyes on my head to keep myself going forward. You ever wonder how hamsters are able to run in those balls for hours? Yeah, I know, I don't get it either. I also don't get anyone who's able to run, period. But after looking at this illusion by Rock and X10, I can at least see some of the fun to it. At first look, this seems like a pretty cramped hallway, but halfway through we're walking through an immersive portal so that we're not actually walking to the other side of the hallway, but rather falling into it, until eventually we have this repeating circle illusion. And God, you might not want to eat before you try this one. It can get a little disconcerting, but come on, it's still pretty cool. The Warden's a tough mob to kill, and because of that, it can't drown or burn alive. So if you were to put it on top of a pad of magma blocks, it would never die. But if you put those same magma blocks underwater, it also can never escape. Because its movement speed is too slow to escape the current, it'll just spin around in a circle on those bubbles, which is hilarious to watch, but still don't get too close to it. Otherwise, it could still use its sonic boom attack and make it a lot less funny to watch. Beacons are a sight we're all familiar with, but maybe not like this. Though, even if this seems cursed, the tech to pull it off is surprisingly simple. See, beacons are transparent blocks, meaning beacon beams can pass through other beacons. So if you have the spare blocks on hand, you can make something of a custom beacon in vanilla. And while this does wind up being a pretty expensive facade, the results are definitely unique, and it might be the perfect prank for your next friend's visit. When you're talking about Minecraft illusions, there's truly nothing that you can do better than the Immersive Portals mod. Don't believe me? Well, look at this. Now, that is a village, but it's also played out on top of our table. And this isn't the mini village mod. What's actually happening is that if we place a large portal over a village and then connect it to a smaller portal inside of a room, then because of the way that it scales things differently with the projection, it'll make it look as if that entire village has been shrunk down to a teeny size, giving you a cute little desk ornament, and giving the villagers the terrifying realization that they're being confronted by God. We usually don't think of experience orbs as entities, but after this experiment, you'll think of them as monsters. Since by throwing a bottle of enchanting through one of these portals, we can have the experience orbs that it's dropping become bigger and bigger in size, until eventually, as we can see from Theo Monty, these can become some of the largest entities that you've ever seen. And at this point, it looks more like a giant slime than a giant XP orb. But unfortunately, even if you collect it, it still gives you the regular amount of experience. But if that bums you out, no worries, since we could also shrink them down through that same system until eventually you just can't even see them. You're just gaining experience for nothing, which I think is kind of funny. When you see a snowball, the last thing you're thinking of is fire. Though if we chuck a snowball through a flame, the projectile will actually ignite, and in Bedrock, it can even cause fire damage to mobs, making that snow golem a proper flamethrower. Why are these armor stands fighting? Well, when you have these statues roll over a detector rail, we can animate them like so, which means that we can use our very own armor stands to recreate something of a sword fight. And then if you have the rails aligned in a row like so, we can throw them into minecarts and have the show commence, which if you ask me could really help to liven up your next Coliseum build. Just don't expect their fight to end anytime soon. Withers are one of the deadliest mobs in Minecraft, especially in Bedrock Edition. That is, until you put them underwater. Since truly, if you were to spawn one of these withers on top of the ocean floor, all of that pressure will just completely break the thing. Doesn't even attack, it's just stuck, and it accepts its fate. At that point, I feel bad about killing it. It's just kinda sad. Nah, but getting an easy beacon makes those feelings go away. Shulkers are an invaluable item to have when it comes to storing your stuff. But what if they could store more than just items? Well, that's the idea behind this community-made Mega Shulker concept. Here, we can store a fully fledged build inside something like a structure block and place it wherever we'd like. And hey, we can even store mobs inside like so, giving us a lot more freedom than just some measly 27 slots. So the next time you're looking to move house, why not just actually move the house instead of just the stuff inside? In Bedrock Edition, it's possible to keep parrots on your shoulder when you take flight with an elytra. Or rather, I should say, you're keeping them around where your shoulders should be. Since when you look at it from this angle, it really just looks like they're hovering in place, which is a bit peculiar, but they're at least more loyal than the ones in Java Edition, who bail on you when you start to get any kind of speed. If we were to use this command, then we're able to take a perfectly square portal and make it into a pretty convincing circle. And now it looks a lot less like a nether portal and a lot more like one that was made by Dr. Strange. And strange is the right word. I think there's no reason for a circle to ever be in Minecraft. Sorry, Mr. Cat. Just looks weird. Now, if you scroll through your YouTube recommended, you've likely seen this illusion show up in a thumbnail once or twice. So let's break down how it works. See, what's happening here is that if we place 3 sea lanterns like so in the corner of a room, it'll give the illusion of a weird rotating cube. And that's a strange sight from most any angle that you stare at it. But hey, now you know how it's done, and as long as your friends don't, this could still offer up a solid practical joke to put to use. By using this command to change the scale of our projectiles, you can see that when we get ready to shoot an arrow from our bow, it's going to be a lot larger than the bow that we even used to shoot it. And to me, this is hilarious. I mean, if you only had one in the chamber, you'd at least hope that it's one of these. That seems like it would get the job done. And seeing this done with all the different projectiles in Minecraft, it gets pretty funny. Plus, we can even have it go the other way, giving us teeny tiny projectiles that we can shoot out. I mean, I've heard of a pea shooter, but I've never heard of a pea-sized shooter. That's just brutal. And I think it's very funny when you see this done with tridents as well. We don't think of those as projectiles, but now we might think of them as forks on the ground. But hey, if you come to a fork in the road, I guess you can pick it up. Shields are a very useful tool, but once you're holding one of these, speed is the last thing on your mind. Though, the Bedrock Edition might have an interesting solution for that. Here, when your friend holds a shield, we can punch them multiple times and still get the knockback, which has led some in the community to discover a technique like this. Here, we can alternate shield usage between the 2 players and essentially create a ladder of sorts. No joke, you could even use this to jump 6 blocks high in some cases. And not to mention that using this properly could also help you to clear horizontal distances as well, making these shields a lot better for traversal than any of us thought. This villager was never seen in Minecraft, but if you go within the game's files, there sure enough is an unused texture for the angry villager mob, featuring red eyes and angry eyebrows. And even though villagers can still get mad in the game if you were to punch them, even with all those particles, it's still not nearly as intimidating as one of these. If you're building out a base in the nether, then looking up at that same ugly red tinted sky can get pretty old pretty fast. I mean, at least in the overworld you get clouds, that's way more of a treat to look at. So if you want to recreate that, then you can actually do such by making windows or sky illusions in your base. And it definitely puts you on the right track to turning your underground base into way more of a Caesar's palace. So if you ever get bored of the trapped in lifestyle, this might be a way to get a change of scenery without actually having to, well, change the scenery of your base. And honestly, I don't know which one would be more effort to do. What would you think is the strongest mob in Minecraft? Well, it might seem like the Warden, considering that it only takes 3 hits to kill you in full netherite enchanted armor. The crown for this would actually go to a charged creeper. Considering that on hard difficulties, this can do 127 damage. And for that much, you probably want to have a good set of blast protection armor, or at least a totem of undying as a backup call. Building with slabs is a pain. Not only does it take an extra crafting step to make these, but when you accidentally stack up a double slab like this, then there's no way to actually break the 2 slabs individually. Now, you can place them individually, but there's no way to pick and choose which one of these that you want to break. And personally, that's why I like playing with mods like this, so I can pick and choose my battles, or break the whole thing if I really want to. There's so many ways that Mojang can fix this, it doesn't make sense that it's still in the game. Once your friend goes AFK, that's your cue to bust out the redstone knowledge. Since with the help of a proper flying machine, you're able to relocate that static player to an entirely different location on the map. And personally, I like shooting them right up into the sky and leaving them there. I mean, they'll be pretty safe up there. It's not exactly like mobs are gonna spawn. And as long as they don't freak out too much when they come back to their computer, it could be quite the silly surprise for them to lay their eyes on. And a good opportunity to practice their water bucket clutch. I mean, come on, at that point, it's just thoughtful. Before you try fishing, you should look up first. Since if you're fishing in an area where you don't see clear sky above the water, that'll double your waiting time. So while it might sound safe and convenient to fish inside a cave, it's not gonna be that convenient having to wait double the time as opposed to fishing up on the surface. Not to mention the fact that you also get a bonus when it rains outside. So don't waste your time and just move your bobber upstairs. Stop using fireworks for your elytra. Instead, try a dolphin. No joke, if we take after this user's example, all we have to do is attach a lead to a dolphin, start swimming in the ocean, and then once we build up enough speed with the dolphin's grace potion effect, we can go straight from swimming right up into launching into the sky. And while that's ridiculous enough on its own, it's funny to realize that we're not the only one that takes flight. So make sure that you and your dolphin buddy landed somewhere safe. Illusions are nothing new to Minecraft, and if you need proof for that, we've not only covered plenty on this channel, but even this map dating back to 2014 from Bigry, the original creator of the Dropper, has an entire world filled with these illusions. Things like the Penrose staircase, this water feature that flows illegally, or my personal favorite, which is this confusing cube. Yeah, it looks like you got your cables in a twist when you left them on your desk, and it's probably just as impossible to untangle. But if you're looking for a surefire way to confuse yourself, there's more than a few to see here. And if it really bothers you being that confused, then you could always fly around them in creative and actually see how the sausage gets made. Minecraft famously has its share of visual quirks, and while we've talked at length about those in the past, this one just cracks me up. See, if we were to hold a ladder as an item in our hands, it has about the same amount of depth as anything else. But when you place that same ladder on the side of a block, it turns paper thin. I mean, this ladder has less depth than a ladder item dropped on the floor. And unless we get something like default 3D in the base game, I guess it'll be a fun thing to notice going forward. Never craft this block, because while it might seem handy to compress your 9 nether wart down to 1 nether wart block, unlike other compressed material blocks, this can't be crafted back into its base material. And considering the fact that you're able to get these blocks from the Crimson Trees, I'd say it's better to save your nether wart for your potion farm. There's already going to be plenty enough supply of these the other way around. One of the most recent lies in Minecraft is that the ancient city actually has a giant portal that can be lit. But regardless of how many videos and thumbnails you've seen trying to say otherwise, that's just not the case. But Mojang didn't help themselves here, since for a brief time in the files of the snapshot, they actually did refer to this structure as a portal. And at that point, you're just begging for people to theorize about it. So it's not true, but who knows, maybe it was supposed to be. The different mob heads that you get from charged creepers make for great trophies in Minecraft. But they're not exactly doing much there, so if you decide to take the creeper off your shelf and instead put it on your head, then let's get ready to scare your friend when they get back online. Doing a setup like this, all you gotta do is chug an invisibility potion, put yourself right in their line of sight, and get ready to scare them. When they log back in, they might just be so startled that they don't know what to do, which means that if you're super cruel, you can use them trying to get away to go right into another trap of your design and might just kill them. If we push this cat off a cliff, nothing happens, and thankfully so, otherwise it'd be a murderer. But the idea behind this is that cats tend to land on their feet, and that'd be why cats in Minecraft not only don't take fall damage, but even if they were to fall into a dripstone spike, they're still not gonna get hurt, which is a pretty sweet deal. It's hard to say I'm not jealous. Normally, we're not able to sleep in the nether. That's literally intentional game design. And while it's already confusing enough when the villagers start sleeping in the nether, we can also join in on the fun with this mod. And just like all of the best brilliantly stupid ideas, the mod developer made this in 4 hours very early in the morning on very little sleep, which I've gotta say, fits pretty well with the concept. At least now they're able to sleep wherever they want, and it's when you see yourself sleeping on top of an end crystal during the dragon fight that you really tell how silly this gets. But now I guess the dragon's not the only one that's gonna respawn in the end. At least we didn't cost 4 end crystals. Minecraft treats certain hitboxes in weird ways, and that can be best seen when we talk about entity stacking. See, in certain cases, it's possible to rest one entity on top of another. And while I personally use this for letting me use a minecart as a hat, it can also let us crowd surf. Sure enough, if you ride a boat on top of a bed of entities, we can ride it just the same as we would on ice. Granted, it might not be the most popular travel method, but I'd say it's definitely worth a try, at least once for the screenshot. Although goats in Minecraft can tend to break off their horns when they run into a wall, that's not actually based on anything in real life, because the truth is that goats' horns are actually a part of the animal's skull. So if they were to break off, the goat would have bigger problems. And really, this behavior in Minecraft much more closely resembles a deer with its antlers. Even though the only way to craft a lodestone is to use a netherite ingot, unfortunately, this expensive block isn't immune to fire or lava the same way that netherite is. It's not even like just the stone burns off and you get the netherite ingot back. The whole thing disappears, which could be quite the tragedy if you were to drop one of these in the nether. Shulker boxes are a crucial item to get your hands on, but while they're great for storage, they're not the best for item security. For an example, if you took all of your best valuables and enchanted tools into this one box, then if you dropped it into lava or something, all of it would get destroyed, even if it was netherite. But now we might have a chance to save some. In 1.17, a shulker box will pop when destroyed, allowing some of the items to escape the danger. In a game made of cubes, getting a convincing circle is a tough concept, but with a mix of cleverly placed stairs and blocks, we can start to get a pattern like this. And to go a step further, by using a mix of item frames and torches, we can use this command to place seemingly illegal decorations off of the grid. So while you might have to trust the process to pull this off, the end result is nothing short of mind-bending. And if anything, it's just weird to finally place torches on a stair block. It just doesn't look right. By looking into this hole, we've got ourselves a perfect cow spine machine. And best yet, the cow's none the wiser. And the way that we make this happen is having an immersive portal tied up together with a repeating command block so that it's constantly teleporting our portal directly over an entity that we want to watch. And the the original poster on Reddit has an even more helpful set of rules that you can see here on screen. Make the portal, name it with the command, and then with a repeating always active command block, you have it constantly teleport the portal entity above whatever entity that you want it to follow, giving us the perfect crystal ball to spy on your friends or your enemies. I won't judge. In the April Fool's snapshot for the one block at a time update, if you were to summon in an Iron Golem using this special name, then you'd notice that Billy Belong has its arms permanently extended into the air, which is actually a reference to one of the developers that works on Minecraft, which is an odd way to be memorialized, but it's not like the Dinnerbone name tag makes any more sense anyway. When it comes time to take on the dragon, me and my friends like to do it together as a bit of an event. So we go to the end dimension, take down the dragon, and then boom, whoever lands the last hit is the only person to get the achievement. There's other achievements in the game that don't require you to be the sole person to do it, but all of a sudden when it comes down to killing the dragon, nope, it's just whoever got the last hit. And really, it would be better to see this group effort regarded as such, instead of an every player for themselves mentality. Over the years, Minecraft has steadily added new pets to choose from. While everyone else opts for a dog or maybe the new axolotl, what if you want something a bit more unique? Well, there is a solution, albeit a weird one. Now, of course, the main thing that you're looking for with a pet is loyalty. So why don't go straight to the source with a Loyalty 3 Trident? No kidding, what this thing lacks in pulse, it apparently makes up for in companionship. So simply throw the thing, fill up your inventory slots, and then you can watch it follow you around. Even though we can now craft bamboo and defense blocks like this, unfortunately those fences are always going to be thicker than the bamboo stem itself. But then again, this is only noticeable if you're able to get it to line up, because bamboo is randomly offset when you place it as well. So really, what seems like it would be a great combo is anything but that. So if you want it to line up, you're just gonna have to break the bamboo stalk and craft it into whatever you're building out of. Even just looking at screenshots of this maze makes it confusing, but playing it doesn't make it any easier. We'll not only walk through different portals to teleport into random places, but also have our size change as well as the gravity that we're standing with. Yeah, if you ever wanted reality to fold in on itself, then you can download it from this map. And we've already shown off in the past using white concrete to make infinity rooms, but this takes that concept a little too literally. I think I'd rather just stay with map art and item frames to get this illusion. And if you really want to make your build feel as big as feasibly possible, then this is a simple way to do that. Since if we connect our portals in such a way where this one loops into the one behind it, then when you run through, we've got an infinite loop. Now it's hard to tell if we're chasing ourselves or if they're chasing us. And where this can really start to mess with your head is if you start looking around in the other directions that you lit. And honestly, if you build one of these out in the open like we did initially here, it's amazing how weird it looks there too. Like we've got an infinite tunnel digging into this mountain when we all know that there's nothing there. We didn't build that. But it does give you the perfect place for a Scooby-Doo haul chase, and I think that's pretty fun. Minecraft staircases should be straightforward, but as we've shown in the past, there are plenty of weird staircases that we can put to use in our worlds, and this is no different. What might look like a random mix of blocks and foodstuffs is actually the fastest walkable staircase in the game. The truth is that the way that these hitboxes are laid out, it's just so that we can stand in the middle and climb these staircases seamlessly. And sure, a proper spiral staircase would look much nicer, but if you want the speed as you climb up to your mountain, this is hard to beat. If we continue to wrap through these portals in the opposite direction, we can get ourselves down to an incredibly small size. And what I think is so funny about this is that we actually interact with things very different here. Like for us, falling off of a carpet wouldn't be that bad in regular size, but when you get this small, it's the equivalent of falling off of a 5-story building. Fishing in Minecraft has long been overpowered, so much so that Mojang decided to nerf the treasure loot tables back in 1.16 for most of the fish farms. However, even the nerfed version of fish farming is still pretty overpowered. You see, if you were to take a random water bucket from anywhere in the world, be it a jungle, the ocean, or even a rain-filled cauldron, and then you place that water source wherever you'd like, you can still fish infinite cod and salmon out of that one block. I'm not complaining, but it is a bit strange. This might look like a hopper, but it's actually a chute, which is just one of the many different blocks in Buildcraft that went on to inspire the way that we move our items in Minecraft. But what's even more interesting about the Buildcraft chute is that it actually was called the Hopper, but changed the name when Minecraft used it in the vanilla release. I guess that would get pretty confusing, but it also makes the inspiration pretty clear to see. Farmland has some weird restrictions that Dirt doesn't. Mainly, it's not a full block, so we're not able to place decorations on the side. This is the reason why torches and ladders don't go on the side of farmland, which is a weird limitation, especially for the torches, but I guess it's understandable. Though, while those don't work, for some reason, signs do. And honestly, putting a torch on the side of your farmland seems a lot less crazy to me. But if you really want it, just type torch on the side of the sign, and there. That's the closest you're gonna get. Everyone knows that when you break all the logs in a tree, the leaves should disappear. But that doesn't explain why these are still left standing hours after the trunk. And no, this doesn't have anything to do with update suppression or changing the random tick speed, but rather, we just replace the leaves on our friends' trees with ones of our own. Then, once we place them back down, these decoration blocks can no longer despawn over time, which not only gives them an eyesore, but it also guarantees a couple of chores for them to clean up. What happens if you smell smelt mushrooms. Well, in every other version, nothing. You don't even need to cook them for mushroom stew. But in Pocket Edition, it used to be possible to smelt red mushrooms to get, well, red dye, which seems like a lot of hassle to go through considering that you could just craft a rose and get the same results. If you don't have a compass, try looking out for some pumpkins. Crazy as that might sound, the pumpkin stem is always rendered in such a way where it's facing towards the northwest direction. And there you go. Even if you don't have a North Star, you've essentially got a North Squash. So if you know what direction your base is, this will at least help you get back on track. What if Minecraft wasn't made of cubes? I mean, it sounds like a dumb question, right? Would it really even be Minecraft anymore? And it only takes one look at the No Cubes mod to try and figure that out for yourself. I mean, sure, I can still recognize the terrain and everything, but am I comfortable looking at it? Not so much. But what's really impressive here is that because this mod's so optimized, it actually runs better than the blocks that we're used to in Minecraft. But when you start to go into a cave and explore around here, it makes me glad that Minecraft works on a grid system. I would not be able to figure this out any other way. With this, it's possible to lay a fake version of a block on top of the face of one cube. And hey, the same could be done with map art if you're looking for a vanilla option. So if you want to hide your valuables chest, just disguise it with an unassuming block, you'll be just fine. Or you can make it look like you have illegal blocks like Bedrock and Survival. I know we don't like to talk about it, but if you actually crunch the numbers, Minecraft is ripping you off. If you look at it, it takes 6 planks to craft 4 stairs, even though a stair is 3/4 of a block. Where the extra parts go, I just don't know. I guess Steve is a bit of a wasteful person. And while again, the stone cutter does dampen this blow, that's not an option for any wood items. And folks, there's nothing I like less than getting stolen out of my hard-earned materials. If you use a dispenser to shoot armor at a villager, it'll actually equip it into their secret inventory. And make no mistake, even if you can't see it, they are definitely wearing it. They'll take way longer to kill, and they can even use the Thorns enchantment as well. So if you've got an amazing villager that you're trying to keep safe from your zombies, this is definitely a useful trick to keep them alive. Or if you're looking for more live entertainment, then you could give a villager Frostwalker and send it out into the ocean. Dispensers in Minecraft are able to do a lot of the same capabilities that we can do with a right click. And while this means that they can literally place and refill water buckets at their own notice, if they're next to a cauldron, they're not actually able to fill them. Honestly, I don't know how this hasn't been added in. The way it is, it just seems like we're limiting this feature for really no one's benefit. It's not game breaking, it would just be kind of cool. And it could definitely add some fun machinery to your next potion farm. If we were to get a drowned mob with a trident into this system, throw the trident at us, and that trident will catch on fire, which we can then use to ignite a piece in TNT, and that'll cause all of these villagers down here to die on the spot, and coincidentally, all turn into zombies. And while we've shown off in the past using the similar version of this to make a record farm, I think this design ends up being a lot more practical, but also a lot more cruel, so maybe check your morals at the door. It's impossible to stack stew in your inventory, or at least it would have been, unless you try something like this, since while the stew itself is not able to be stacked, all of the ingredients within that crafting recipe are. So if you wanted to stack 64 suspicious stew inside of your inventory, all you gotta do is dedicate 4 slots. 64 dandelions, 64 brown mushrooms, 64 red, and 64 bowls. Which at that point, they should just let the stews stack up to being 16 in each slot. But maybe that's something for that inventory update that we hopefully get someday. For a brief period in Minecraft Java, there was a time where you were able to craft both horse armor and horse saddles. And oddly enough, there was a unique item just for riding the horse with this saddle. Meaning that even if you went through all the effort to get 5 leather and 3 iron ingots, you couldn't use this on a pig. And even stranger still, it could be stacked up to 32 in a stack, which again, made it unique. But that didn't save this or the horse armor crafting recipes from getting patched out of the game shortly after. Now, if you let any block that needs Silk Touch to mine fall to the ground, it'll either break into its regular non-Silk Touch variant, or just break entirely. And that also means you have to be very particular in how you place your bees' nests, since without the proper support, they could just fall to the ground and break entirely, giving both us and the bees quite the issue. If we spawn a mob inside of the smaller portal, then when we go over to the larger one, they'll always look larger, essentially giving you a magnifying glass to look closely at any mobs. But I'll be honest, I've never wanted to look this close at anyone, let alone a mob. But you can get a nice look at their pixels. You see, in Java, we see a gold nugget as just that. Something that you can use to craft a gold ingot, but that's about it. But in Bedrock, it's fuel, for some reason. When I first heard of this, I thought, there's just no way. But yeah, if you try it, it does in fact burn. But it's not even a good fuel source. You need about 12 of them just to smelt up one item. But if you're looking to burn some cash, I guess this does the trick. This furnace only exists in Bedrock Edition, since in the past, if you had a Silk Touch pick and you managed to break a furnace while it was smelting, you'd be left with a unique item called the Lit Furnace. Though, make no mistake, this is definitely not intentional, considering when you hovered over the item in your inventory, the name had an underscore like it would show up in the game's files. And that's likely why this got patched out in the first place. Ender pearls can make for a great escape plan, but what if you're not in danger, but rather, you're just looking to confuse your friend? Well, even in that case, an Ender pearl stasis chamber does the job just right. Since with one of these set up on a timer, you could appear in your friend's house out of nowhere, or vanish from their eyes in an instant, and that's definitely going to be enough to confuse them. Especially if you can bait your friend into chasing you, and then flip a switch so that halfway through the chase scene, you're removed from the script entirely. Alright, be honest, what render distance do you play on? 12, 16, or 48? Since with this mod called Slide, you're able to move the sliders in the options menu completely off the bar. And honestly, I think just the clips alone of sliding it off like this is pretty funny. But it could be useful too. I mean, if you want to take a screenshot of the entire end island that you transformed, you're really not able to fit that in low FOVs in your entire render distance. So with this, it becomes a little bit more useful, if not a lot more laggy too. And if you're gonna try this out, I should say, the mod developer says that you should never change the target resolution outside of its slider. Otherwise, that'll cause the game to crash. I mean, if that's your goal, go ahead, but you can't say I didn't warn you. We're all plenty familiar with piglins, but maybe not like this. And to change their look like that, we'll have to head over to the Nether. Then we get our piglins into a pen and flip the switch on a dispenser to equip different items, which clearly can create some odd monstrosities. Or if you want to look at it like this Reddit user, and they're just an anime girl wearing a hat. And honestly, I don't know which is worse to see. In science, perpetual motion machines are just a hypothesis. But in Minecraft, it's as simple as 8 rails placed together like so. Since by building a square of regular rails like this, if you place a minecart on top of the slope, it'll continue to go around and around the loop, never slowing down. And to make things funnier, you put an entity inside, and that just makes the whole thing speed up. Here's how to take your boat from the ocean right up to sky limit. Since in Bedrock Edition, if you place your boat on top of a pad of slime blocks and then jump on top of it, then once we finally get inside, there was so much potential energy locked in that boat that it'll shoot right up into the sky, giving you a neat party trick to show off to your friends, or who knows, it might even be a cheap way to get an elytra launcher. You probably know that carpets can be placed over string, but what about these blocks? Because the truth is that carpet only needs to be placed over any non-air block, which oddly enough means that it's completely fine to bridge with carpet over water, grass, fire, snow, and even lava blocks. And while I wouldn't recommend using only a piece of cloth to keep you safe from the lava beneath, as this user did show, it's clearly possible, just maybe not the most safe. And when you finally get sick of trading with your villagers, then with the help of this data pack, we're able to make it so that if you tuck a hopper underneath a villager's bed, then when they sleep, their items will just pour into the chest, which finally gives you a good reason for not sleeping in the village at night, proving ultimately that when they snooze, they lose, and the rest will be our game. Before horses were added to Minecraft, there were horses. Notice the quotation marks, because these special mobs were only in the Java Edition snapshots for the April Fool's update, and they were really just retextured cows and pigs, which did make for a good joke, but shortly after, Mojang worked with Dr. Jark to add in proper horses into the game, and thankfully they didn't look like this. When you're exploring in Minecraft, we all know to pack a bunch of food, yet somehow I still never seem to bring enough. And would you believe it, that was even worse in the beta versions of Minecraft, since back then only the cookies would stack, and even then you could only have up to 8 of them in a given stack. And thankfully nowadays we've got much better pockets for our pork. Now this wolf's tail is spinning, but why? Well, to answer that, we first need to know that a tamed wolf's tail is linked to its health. So the lower its health, the lower the tail. And conversely, if we use commands to make it have a higher health, yeah, the tail starts spinning. So if you were to use the effect commands to give the dog both health boost and regeneration, we could watch its tail spin in real time. Just don't get dizzy when you try to watch it. If you were to line the bottom of a nearby riverbed using mud blocks, then that row of mud will cancel out the swimming animation, allowing you to just run like normal underneath the water. And this is due to the fact that mud actually renders you 1 pixel lower inside of the block, so you're not really running in water, you're running in mud. Water isn't all that bouncy. A bold statement, I know. But that might be unfortunate, because as you'll soon find out, these fish love to bounce around. And to test that, let's set up a slime block trampoline right over here on dry land. Then all it takes is spawning a cod in place, and you'll see that sucker take off to the moon and back. It looks like it's having a blast, but if you're gonna do this, maybe give the fish a health boost or something, so that this party doesn't turn into a murder mystery. So even though these fish might not like dry air, I think this might make their stay a bit more enjoyable. Similar to our yes and no illusion, this cube looks like just that, a cube. But what from this angle looks like a full cube rendered out, when we move off to the side, you can see that it's not actually connected all the way around. And at this point, I think I would just prefer looking at it from this side angle here. Figuring out how to start building your Minecraft dream home can be a real challenge. But when your house works like a fever dream, then that might be on the right track. At first glance, all that's visible is this tiny house, but on the inside, you'll see a much larger picture. You see, if we lay out the viewing angle just right from this entrance, we can give the illusion of a much larger house inside the little shack. And even if it becomes less convincing once we walk around, from the right view, it's still a real sight to see. Now, it's common sense that if you're on fire, water is the cure-all solution. I mean, even cauldrons uphold that fact. They aren't exactly for consistency. But if we all know that to be true, then I ask, how in the world does this work? As it happens, if you're on fire in a boat, you're able to submerge yourself in water and still burn the same. Stranger still is that you're still able to drown in that very water, even if it doesn't put you out. And folks, that's the definition of a lose-lose situation. Here's why the hanging sign might be one of the deadliest blocks added to Minecraft. No, I'm being serious. If you boot up Bedrock Edition and place a hanging sign like this, then by throwing a channeling enchanted trident into it in the right angle, you'll see that the trident gets stuck, but it's not deadly. At least, you think it isn't. That is until you have an entity actually walk underneath it. At that point, the trident thinks it's supposed to spawn some lightning, and any mob that comes close enough to it will be struck by lightning many times a second. And then what your friend thought was just a simple store selling tridents quickly turns into a funeral home. Their funeral home. Take a good look at this. It just looks like a regular ice cream sandwich. And if you fly just right, it even seems as if it's built that way. So what's so special? Well, as soon as we move off of that charted path, it turns out that the ice cream itself is actually separated from the sandwich, which is not only an illusion, but also an identity crisis. I mean, what's an ice cream sandwich without ice cream? But really what this has made me realize is just how much the book texture looks like an ice cream sandwich. Minecraft has plenty of mobs to witness in the base game, but once you've played as much as we have, these things are old hat. So if you're tired of foxes that look like this, then maybe this is worth a shot. See, by using armor stands aligned like such, we can use much smaller versions of the blocks to create our own special sculptures. And the best part is that all of these are possible without using mods. So while the complexity on display can clearly vary, there's still plenty of creativity to see. And while I can only imagine the headache would require to painstakingly lay out each piece of this tiger, I also can't argue that the results are quite special. If we were to cast a fishing rod and then zoom in, you'll notice that in Java, the fishing bobber is a 2D texture, but in Bedrock it's a 3D modeled cube. And why the difference, I'm not exactly sure. It seems like more effort to do the 3D cube anyway, but it does fit Minecraft a little better, so I think it's fair. Speed bridging is a big deal for the PvP community, and while it's a big skill to place blocks like this on Java, on Bedrock it's possible to place blocks without sneaking to the edge, and that'll even allow us to speed bridge on a horse for some reason. Did you know creepers are aliens? Well, not all of them, but this one certainly is. Since, thanks to an experiment done by the University of Southampton, students were able to send personal belongings into space, and one of those students sent a creeper. So when you look up into space, just know that somewhere out there was a creeper, and thankfully it didn't explode on the way out. Otherwise, that wouldn't be as fun of a fact. Minecraft has its fair share of hazardous blocks. You wouldn't want to stand on something made of magma, that much makes sense. But then why is the stonecutter safe? Now, if it was the old stonecutter texture, I would get it. There, the saw blade's completely enclosed. But here, it's completely out in the open, for everyone to see. And while there do exist some data packs to make this dangerous, those just make it feel like you're hurting yourself for no reason. But especially with things like dripstone spikes getting added into the game, I still never understand why Mojang has this block this way. When you're inside, this elevator feels like it could go on forever. And apparently, that's more than true. Since what's happening here is that when we press this button, it isn't the floor that's going up through the elevator, but rather the walls that are coming down. Sure enough, if this user shows off with a little bit of command block trickery and some distinct patterns, we can make it seem as if we're constantly going up this elevator shaft. But when you step outside, it turns out that nothing's actually moving. And while this illusion only really works if you're standing on the inside, it is still pretty cool to watch from the outside as well, almost like a barbershop pole illusion. By throwing down seeds for a villager, regardless of the type, they're gonna walk towards and pick it up. And this blew my mind when I first heard it. I thought it would have only worked with farmer villagers, but sure enough, there is a way to get them to follow the breadcrumb trail. The way that banners render in Bedrock, it's possible to place a banner down in water and it'll be completely visible from up top. Just, you know, soggy. If you were to get a glass pane inside of your inventory in both versions, then you'll notice that in Bedrock, they have a 3D icon, while in Java, the glass panes use a 2D sprite, which could be a problem if you were to dye your glass pane, since a light gray stained glass pane is a lot more obvious in Bedrock than it's ever been in Java. Nobody likes it when you're ready for bed and then you're told that you can't sleep. And I'm not just talking about the message that you get when there's monsters nearby, but specifically this one, which is that the game's telling you you that the bed is too far away. Now, hold on, it's close enough to click on. I thought I was well within my rights to assume I could sleep here. But no, I guess this is a special case. And considering the fact that no other block in Minecraft shares this behavior, it feels like an unnecessary attempt at realism, and then at the same time, effectively breaking the game's own internal logic. Unless they decide to use a macro or way down a key on their keyboard, AFK players aren't the most active. So to fix that, one of my favorite things to do is put my AFK friends inside of an AFK loop-de-loop machine like this. Through the help of slime blocks, pistons, and ice blocks, you're able to completely get them cycling around this perpetual motion machine, giving them enough motion to make sure they don't get kicked for being AFK, and you quite the spectacle to watch as they're trapped. If we were to open up the Book and Quill in Bedrock, you'll notice that we can see 2 pages at once, while in Java, we're only seeing 1 at a time, which is a little more straightforward, but on Bedrock it actually feels like a book. And if only it was easier to type on console. Now, if you were to get hit by a falling anvil, it's gotta hurt. And while that's true for us, it's not as much for the villagers. Or at least if you compare the two, in Bedrock, if you drop an anvil on a sleeping villager, it won't take any damage. Don't go near this composter. Well, I warned you. With a sticky piston and a slab, we can add in an armor stand like this and pop up any mob that we choose out of our composter. And then the real kicker is that if we fill in the composter with something like hay, all of that compost can completely hide the head inside. Or rather, it'll hide it until it's too late. Leather armor keeps you from freezing in powdered snow, but that's a broader statement than you might think, since really any amount of leather armor is enough to do the job. So by just having leather boots, you're no longer going to freeze on the entire rest of your body, even when fully submerged in the powdered snow. And at that point, it seems like a bit much. I get wearing these moccasins to be able to walk on top of the powdered snow, but to keep you completely safe in the snowy peaks, that might be pushing it. Especially when mobs that drop leather aren't safe by themselves inside of the powdered snow. And it just seems like Mojang picking favorites. During the survival tests of Minecraft, the creepers actually did melee damage to the player, which, yeah, pretty strange to see. But if a player were to get too close to a creeper at this time, they would deal 4 points of damage or 2 hearts of damage if you got too close. And it wasn't until the in-dev phase of 0.31 that this feature was ultimately removed. And thankfully so. It'd be pretty brutal if they could attack you to make you lower your shield and then explode. Clearly, armor stands can be used for some pretty amazing things. And with the help of command blocks, we can push that even further. See, all of these NBT data changes that we do like so, we could automate with repeating commands, meaning we can turn an armor stand like this into a working ceiling fan, which I'll fully admit seems ridiculous, but I also can't argue with the results. And while this option with swords maybe takes the term propeller blades a bit too literally, we could just as well use shields like this example. The next time you're on fire, you might want to look for a candle, because while it won't help, in Bedrock Edition, it is possible to light a candle while your body's on fire. And the same also goes for campfires as well, which doesn't solve your problem, but it might kill 2 birds with 1 stone. When you're traveling, nothing breaks your stride quite like water. Sure, if you have a boat, you're just fine, but on your own, we tend to move a lot slower through the water source blocks. Then, if that's the case, why is it that when you waterlog a ladder, it becomes faster than a regular ladder? No joke, the game somehow combines the water swim speed with the climbing speed of the ladder and makes the operation all the quicker. And while the science would likely disagree, I'll take any excuse to get to Skylimit faster. As if the portals in this mod weren't already confusing enough, we can make them so much worse, since they're not just confined to the regular squares and rectangles that we see in Minecraft, but they can also be turned into curves, causing them to loop you inside of circles like this. So even though it appears that we're moving forward, we're really just stuck in time. And if this is the kind of sacrifices we have to make to see circles in Minecraft, I think it's not worth it. My brain can't take it. Here's how to moonwalk in Minecraft. All we need is an elytra. First off, we're gonna fly down to the ocean, and then hold up the spacebar so that we push ourselves back up to the top of the water. And then from there, we can just start walking backwards, which is a fun sight for sure, but remember, this will use up some of your elytra durability, proving that even the best dance moves have their expiration date at some point. When you think of mobs, you're probably picturing something like this, or this, but probably not this. Though when they were first added in back in the Java Edition survival test, they were just that. And initially, signs would only spawn by pressing the B key, at which point it would say the text, "This is a test of the sign, each line can be 15 characters. Minecraft has been around for a while, so as that goes, many features have been added in and then just sort of forgotten. And chief among those has to be the furnace minecart trains. As you can see, they can't go around corners, they can't go up or down, or even change directions without disconnecting. Honestly, I'm amazed it's still in the game. While I doubt that Mojang will ever take a look back into the old piece of code this is lying in, until that happens, I guess we'll just have to keep up the hype train. Back in Java Edition Classic, when you broke a wood log, it would drop the planks instead of the actual block, which seems more like mine than craft to me. This is a chest full of stone, and this is a full stone chest. It's confusing, I know. But while Mojang only lets us make this one chest design, the Frame Blocks mod not only lets us make a chest out of birch and dark oak, but also out of random blocks like obsidian and cobblestone. If you were to place a water source block next to a non-full block like mud, soul sand, or the like, and then walk forward into a wall, you'll notice that because the block isn't a full 16 pixels in size, we'll just start to bounce up and down indefinitely because of the water. And this is also the reason why you never want to bridge out of soul sand when you're going through a lava lake, because it's too low, you're gonna catch on fire. Never place your bed under the end portal. I know that sounds like a weird place to put it, and you definitely don't want to place it in the end where it would explode, but what's so special about the end portal? Well, by simply having your bed underneath here and then setting your spawn point to it, then you're making sure that every time that you respawn, you're gonna be soft locked to only respawn in the end. And that's because of the way the game places you next to the bed when you've set your respawn point to it. And unfortunately for you, even killing the dragon wouldn't fix this, since all you would succeed in doing then is going through the return gateway portal, only for the game to think that it should put you back at your spawn point, thus being the bed, and now you're back to square one, but with less dragons, so now you got one less friend in your infinite nightmare. One of the monumental discoveries that shaped the landscape of Minecraft Redstone has to be these block update detector switches. These bud switches, as the community likes to call them, are such an essential way to how we play the game. I mean, up until 1.11, it was the only way to tell if a block got updated. And folks, it doesn't take a lot of redstone know-how to see just how useful one of those could be for farms, which is why, luckily for us, Mojang added these in officially through the form of observers. Now, that's not to say that the original bud switch isn't still in the game. As you can see here, both are working the same way. But what we do have here is convenience, which I think is how Mojang actually sought to replace it. Because if you ask me if I want to build this whole circuit or just place down one of these blocks with a face, I'm definitely taking my option with the straight face. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?